there's no there's no tail coming out of the back of my side, if you know what I'm trying to say without saying it. And so it was hilarious at the moment, but she was making a real point that I'm just like you. I just happen to be a black person. So one of the things that I've realized now about why I'm so great on diversity is because I was in the military. You have all type of people that you're around. There was Asians, there was Hispanics, there, India. And so you have to learn how to get along because you all are part of the same team and you all have to support each other. So it did introduce you to a whole different way of being. But as far as friends in boot camp, I wouldn't go that far. But you definitely are one. All 35, 40 of you really are to operate as one.
Okay. You remember your drill sergeants?
Yes, Staff Sergeant Bueno. She was a senior drill sergeant, and I actually am connected to her now with Facebook. I love Facebook. Sergeant Horn, who actually wrote in my book that private sales is better at helping others than she is at helping herself, which I still kind of am that way. And then there was a Sergeant Brown, and who was the only African American on the team, and then there was a Sergeant Larson.
Do you have any fond memories of any one of them?
All of them. The comment I just made about Sergeant Horn is something that I relive a lot now in my mind to make sure that I do think about myself while I'm so busy making sure everybody else is good. Because I was kind of risen to a leader role during boot camp, the person that carries the guidon, which is the flagpole. I got assigned it because someone was not doing well, and they would just call you up. Private sales front and center. And so all of a sudden I had the guidon in my hand. Well, during that time I had it, you're kind of the squad's lead. And so I did well. I actually resigned with mine. I actually didn't get taken away the responsibility. I lasted a whole week. And so after me, anybody that didn't do well, I was assigned to them to teach them how to operate that guidon and all the intricacies of holding it and being able to make it drop and turning and so forth, which was kind of fun. It was like dancing to some degree, I guess, while you're serving, as marching is a substitute for dancing. So I would say that carrying the guidon was a privilege, but at the same time, if you were not on point with it, they would quickly remove you from it, letting you know you must perform at your best no matter what you're doing or what the assignment may be.
So I've heard that boot camp can be pretty tough.
Boot camp was very tough. It was more of a mental thing than a physical. Again, one of the differences of the Marine Corps specifically, women were trained to mentally withstand things that the other branches probably did not. And they may have tapped a little bit more into some physical things or some technical things. But the point of a woman being in the Marine Corps, initially, today it's a little different, interestingly, with the new Marines, but free a man to fight. So any male that had a job as either an attorney, an accountant, administrative work, desk work, per se, they would actually need to go get their M16 and go off and fight the war, and a woman would take their job. And that would include across the country or nationally, for that matter, internationally, I guess I should say, as well. So women were to free a man to fight. So it was more about our mental ability to be able to withstand and endure than it was about physical.
How do you think they prepared you mentally to withstand and endure?
A lot of games. One of them, which was, I think, it's the funniest one yet, was actually, I need to do a demonstration. Someone brought candy and dumped it, large containers of candy like you buy for Halloween or something, and dumped it in the trash. So when we were cleaning up, the person that was putting something in the trash noticed that there was candy in there. Now mind it, you got 35, 40, 45 women in a room. We have not had any chocolate. We haven't had any candy. So we were like, oh, it was like the fiends, you know? So needless to say, people started passing out the candy. It was like tons of candy. I don't know. No one's thinking about where's this candy coming from? We just know candy is in the trash and we are going to have it. So we start passing candy out, and all of a sudden the drill sergeants show up. And they're screaming at us and everything. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. So I started going for the trash can to take it out because I was on trash duty. You had certain assignments, right? And In the midst of that, I stuck my candy into my cargo pants. So when we got outside, all the hollering is going on in the back. We got outside. I said, wait a minute. So I put the trash down. I dug a hole, literally got down on my hands and knees like a little dog. Dug a hole. This is called desperate, right? This is part of what you deal with. Dug a hole, took my candy out, put it in there, covered it up, put a little rock as a marker, picked up the 2 pieces and gave her one, had one. We had a piece of candy. We dumped the trash. We dumped the candy wrapper. We went inside, took our punishment, 25 push-ups, jumping jacks. I mean, they just was drilling us, and everybody was like, wore out. But every time I went out to get trash or take the trash out, I would stop and get my little stash. So it was fantastic. So I had about, a week's worth of candy going on stashed outside that they never caught me in. So it was worth the punishment.
Let's talk about your service after boot camp. Where did you go after boot camp?
After boot camp, I went to Little Creek, Virginia, which is like Norfolk area Naval Base, for my training in 0411. Was my MOS, my military occupational specialty, which was logistics, embarkation. And so we went through about 2 months of training there. I had picked up running. I loved running, so I would go running on a regular basis by myself, just for enjoying the area, as well as the fact that it was just beautiful there. It was different than Chicago, being in Virginia, different temperature and everything. So I was enjoying that. And then after finishing there, I came out #1 in my class. We went to our duty stations, and our duty station was Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The majority of us in our class actually got located there. And 2 of my boot camp buddies actually went to the same MOS as I had, so we were all still together, so we supported each other immensely, of course, there, and we had our own little pack. And then we all got stationed at the same location at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And then when we got there, shortly after getting there, there was a reality check that women cannot go on ships and do logistics embarkation, which was basically loading and unloading of ships. And it's like, duh, I mean, they just figuring that out? I mean, they should have probably already knew that. Well, somebody figured it out and said, well, we have to change their MOS. And so then my MOS became my 0411, same office, logistics, but it was maintenance management. So I had to be reschooled at that point in the area of maintenance management, and that's pretty much what I did throughout the rest of my career in the Marine Corps.
What is maintenance management? Maintenance
management, basically, to kind of lump it up, would be we were the S4 office was the logistics office. We were the office that managed the readiness of the equipment. I worked within maintenance battalions, and in these maintenance battalions, they actually had mechanics, technicians, armorers, because we maintained all the guns, we maintained all the trucks and the jeeps and the radios and the tents. So we even had seamstresses as well, because if there was any holes in the tents, then those would have to be repaired. Our office maintained the level of readiness, meaning how many trucks are working, how many radios are working, because you can have as many fighting Marines ready to go out and fight a war, but without their equipment, they're pretty much useless. So the goal is to stay at 98% ready at any given time. And yes, we did pretty well with that in most of the stations I was located. And if not, then it was my job to also go out and give them a hard time about why is this machine down? Why is this truck down? A lot of times, most of the time, it was a little small screw or some type of nail, very small nomenclature. And it's like, well, it's down because of that. And we're like, okay, so we have to wait for supply to bring it in. So that was kind of the job, just managing that. On a day-to-day basis, the commanding officer was informed of the readiness of the unit.
Okay. And your job was to inform that commanding officer?
Correct. My job was to inform my officer, who in turn would inform the commanding officer.
Did you manage other people?
Yes, yes. Since I came out with a stripe, very quickly I was in charge of people, so I didn't have any delay with that. As a matter of fact, on graduation day, we have to get on the, what is it called, cattle car, so that we can make our way back to the barracks to get our items so that we can go home. And they called me up, PFC sales, front and center. And so they're like, we need you to make sure that all of the women Marines are on this cattle car and back by X amount of time. I was like, yes, ma'am, you know, and I jumped right to it. So they've already put me in a leadership role, so my job was to make sure all the privates, because I outranked them now, were on the cattle car, who was once my immediate colleagues. Now I was one rank above them. And also when I got to my first duty station at Camp Lejeune, I was put in charge of cleanup duty. So I got a chance to actually read the newspaper, and I used to do it on purpose. I would sit back and read the newspaper while all the privates did the cleaning, and then after they were finished, then I would kind of inspect and do certain parts of it and just make sure it was ready to go for the next week. So yeah, rank has its privileges.
Now, did you command both male and
Yes.
female Marines?
And there was challenges with that, you know, because, you know, when you talk about Marine Corps, is very much so white male dominated. Many of them generations of families. Their great-grandfather, their great-great-great-grandfather. I mean, like, you know, everybody served as a Marine, the men. So, you know, many of them could have definitely looked at me kind of funny. I mean, like, okay, oh, well, you are a black woman, and I'm like, yes, and I'm in charge. So sometimes the usage of four-letter words were mandatory. And I say that funny kind of way now, but I cursed a lot. You know, it was just the way of communication, not only from the city of Chicago growing up with brothers, but now I got to really get good at it in order to get people to do what I wanted them to do, and with a small amount of words.
Can you give me a scenario where the cursing would have become necessary for you to get your job done?
Being challenged.
Okay.
Specifically with a white male, as if me telling him what to do was when he felt like doing it, and me walking up very closely to him and letting him know with very few words that he need to get his blankety blank blank up and do what I say now. That's being very calm with the tone of saying it. But yes, those were some of the challenges that, you know, cursing was necessary, to the point of, I don't have time to be, we're not going to sit here, I don't need to have dialogue with you. I'm not required to have dialogue with you. You just need to do what I tell you to do, and you need to do it now. And interestingly, when I left that duty station at Camp Lejeune, which by the way is a real Marine Corps, you really learn what it is about being in the Corps at that base. So it was no jokes about the things and the activities. Anybody would walk up on you and correct you with your shoes not being, your boots not being shined, your camis not pressed, your hat's off, you know, any stranger that was a Marine. And so it was that kind of activity going on around there. But when I left that duty station, several of those white males that were my subordinates was clear about saying to me, thank you so much for making me a better Marine. Because I was no nonsense, because I liked the plan, I like the process, I like the procedures, I like the rules and the regulations. This is how we do things. If you don't want to do it this way, you're not going to be here long. And that was the other thing about the Marine Corps. You don't just get to hang out in the Marine Corps. You gain too much weight, you're out. So they keep it real simple. So if you can follow those little rules and regulations, I'm calling them little now, those little rules and regulations, you're going to be successful. And it's people that don't operate well with that type of environment that tend not to be.
So what did you do for relaxation if you got all this pressure?
Well, I love to run, so I picked up on that, and I became an avid runner during the time I served in the Marine Corps, challenging myself all the time, running with grunts, you know, the fighting men. I had several guys that I became friends with, and so I would go on long runs with them, and no telling where we would go on those runs. And so, you know, I think about that sometimes, like, wow, the Lord really kept me, because I was in a lot of positions that a lot of stuff could have happened to me as a woman, but my personality, my presence, and who I was as an individual, it worked. You know, so I didn't make it through successfully without any issues. I did have an issue that I'm dealing with now by addressing MST with someone I dated. But as far as just someone just out of nowhere raping me or taking advantage of me, I did fairly well with that, considering I was surrounded by men most of the time. So that was something I enjoyed doing. And then I also played volleyball. So I played a little bit of basketball, that really wasn't my sport, and also a little bit of softball. So I kind of always had some activities. And I'm from Chicago, so I was a party animal. You know, I mean, if it was a party going on, you can be rest assured Lori was going to show up, you know. So I love sitting around playing cards, bid whist and spades and things like that. So socializing really helped take the heat off of being away from home and being assigned to such a demanding job on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, I've got 3 questions really, but let me start with, when did you take your first trip back home?
Well, the first trip, of course, comes after boot camp, which my mom surprised me and actually showed up at my boot camp, which I didn't know she was going to be there, and which was really great. And let me just quickly share that, is that my drilling sergeant called me up and said, PFC front and center, and brought me to the front of wherever she was standing, and she said, I'm glad you were here, you were a great Marine, blah, 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 some story she gave. And she said, about face. And when I did the about face, my mom was standing right there. And I was like, oh, and I just broke down and cried in her arms. But it was such a great, so she got a chance to really see, like, you really got control over my daughter, was kind of that thing. And then after school, those 2 months, I got a chance to go back home. You know, they give you 30 days in the military to be on vacation. So you can go home quite often, actually. But when I went to Hawaii for 3 years, I was a long way from home, but due to my family's sickness and disease between my parents, they were older, as I mentioned. They were starting to have more problems, so my mother knew all she had to do was call Red Cross. And so I used to go home quite a bit, actually, while living in Hawaii, just to cater to them, though it wasn't really fun trips because I was always more concerned about what's going on until I got there.
When did you get to Hawaii?
After I served at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, when I was leaving there, I had re-enlisted. That was how I got to my next duty station. At that time, they allowed you to join for 3 years. So I didn't know if I was going to do 4 and make it well, this adjustment to this new world of being a Marine. So I signed up only for 3. And after 2.5 years in, I decided to re-enlist. So I re-enlisted and got Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, which was a beautiful place to be stationed. Of course, I'm in my 20s, so, you know, I was still much of a party animal, still much of a social butterfly. I wasn't married, didn't have any children. So I was just enjoying life. And so Kaneohe Bay was a great base to be located, and that's when my family's sickness and disease started happening. Actually, I lost my father while I was stationed in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I know they gave me tissue just in case, but what was, I guess, the better part would be that my father was this alpha male, and I had older brothers, so I grew up with this real alpha male kind of thing. You can do this. And unfortunately, I lost a brother before that while I was home on recruiter's duty. And I remember being in uniform in Chicago on recruiter's duty just for 30 days, you know, something that they allowed you to do, to go home and help them recruit others, in my case, more women. And my brother had an accident and he died from it. And by the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. And I remember immediately I went into the typical crying outburst, and my father walked up on me. He said, you need to remember who you are. And so, of course, I shook it all off. You know, that's right, I'm a woman Marine. I got to shake this out. And I got control of myself immediately because of him addressing it. But lo and behold, when the time came for him to pass on, I was